Hello, welcome to a very special edition of The Ref Show. It's one of the most infamous incidents in the history of modern football. It goes back some 23 years ago now, but to this day, referees who have the misfortune to make more than the odd mistake at Upton Park, home of West Ham United, are serenaded to the tune of "Are You Hackett in Disguise?" Yes, that is our Keith Hackett. You are the ref's Keith Hackett, who's here to face some music now, because in an FA Cup semi-final in 1991, he did this.
And here comes Charles away from Slater. And now Gary Crosby for Forest up against Tony Gale. And Crosby had the pace, and Gale bumped him down. Keith Hackett goes straight to his pocket. It's, what, 23 yards out the challenge. Crosby was away from Gale, and Gale came in, and it's red. It's the cynical foul on the player in the goal-scoring opportunity. Tony Gale has been sent off the pitch in the FA Cup semi-final. What a sensation.
This was at Villa Park, an FA Cup semi-final between Nottingham Forest and West Ham United. Hammer's Tony Gale was the man very controversially sent off there. The score at the time, midway through the first half, was 0-0. Nottingham Forest, under Brian Clough, went on to win 4-0. That's how important that particular incident was. And now, for the very first time since, Tony Gale and Keith Hackett are together in the same room. This room, Gale has said over the years that he can never forgive Hackett for that incident, but this is the first time they've ever talked about it. Are we going to have a handshake before we start, or are you saving that until the end?
We'll do it at the end. But I only came up here because Keith's not allowed down in London.
We weren't going to mention that. And you've come all this way because you're really relishing this. Now, Tony, what happened there?
What happened there was, obviously I got sent off, Alan, and Keith made the decision at the time. But bearing in mind the kind of player that I was, and I think everyone in football will agree that I was more of an interceptor as a player, a central defender. I had a disciplinary record that was second to none. Played 700 games for my clubs over the years. I was only booked 7 times, and 2 of those was for coming out a wall at the wrong time. So probably 5 bookings, and that was the only blot on my copybook, and probably made me infamous. Might have made Keith famous, but it made me infamous at the time, and it was something that I thought was unforgivable.
And you still can't forgive Keith for it?
Well, not for the decision, no. Obviously, we're human beings, and you have to forgive and forget. But maybe forget for me, but not forgive, because what happened was the decision, which I thought was wrong, which was my first FA Cup semi-final. I've been in 2 League Cup semi-finals, but not an FA Cup semi-final, and probably ruined the day of not only myself and probably family totaling 50 that went up there, but also fans totaling probably 30,000 of the 45 in there of West Ham fans, and probably ruined the day which I thought could have been a far better game as well. And you know, since I've gone on and become a pundit and worked for Sky and everything, I still look at the decision then and still think it was wrong.
As a referee, I wasn't one that sent players off willy-nilly. But I feel that even today I'm aggrieved by the fact that I was exposed as a referee by the FA. If this incident had happened the week before, Tony wouldn't have received a yellow card, it might have red.
So what happened in between then?
On the Thursday, Ken Ridden at the FA called all referees in to discuss this particular type of incident. Up to that particular point, we'd worked on the premise that in the Courtney final, where Willie Young brought Alan down, it was cynical, and we believed that this challenge had to be cynical. There wasn't the dog's o offence that we talk about now.
This is denial of a goal-scoring opportunity.
Correct. This was like, it was almost last line of defence, and there wasn't the criteria to say moving towards goal. All those sort of scenarios. It was last man, foul, whatever. And therefore the exposure was Tony, the managers, even referees below the Football League level at that particular time, were not aware of this interpretation.
Your face was a picture. Tell us what you were thinking.
A picture? Well, I just couldn't believe it. You know, I couldn't believe it would be someone like me getting in this kind of situation. I wouldn't have said I was one of the world's most aggressive defenders. We did have players of that ilk in the West Ham teams that I played in, but I think if you asked any of the West Ham players who was least likely to get sent off, it probably would have been me. That's probably might be a little bit of a dent on my reputation as a defender, but I wasn't quite that kind of a defender. I was what I deem as a footballing central defender. So I thought it was a poor decision. And at the time, what I did think, because it was the first decision from the Thursday to the Sunday, I thought it was a bit of an egotistical one at the time, in that Keith wanted to be the first one to make that decision.
Keith?
Which is what I thought at the time.
Yeah, far from that. It wasn't that at all. I mean, and I concur that when I was running and knowing that I've got to make a red card decision out of what I saw was a foul, I'm regretting it before I've got to do it. And then when...
You appeared not to show a lot of sympathy, actually.
Well, I mean, because at the end of it, well, that's part of refereeing. You can't be a shrinking violet in a corner. You've got a big decision, you've made it, and you've got to carry it through. The reality is that if you look at the faces of Tony, his colleagues, and thereafter the comments of the Nottingham Forest players themselves, because as I'm coming away from it, they're actually saying, Keith, that's harsh. That really is harsh. And I'm just sort of then spend the next 10 minutes in a daze. The reality was, there's no question that if you look at the game as a whole, it absolutely ruined the game. It ruined it for the spectators. And dare I say that I wasn't happy myself. And the culmination was, I came into the car park after the game, really unhappy, very unhappy in this particular decision.
Have you got any sympathy, Tony?
Not yet.
And I threw my bag into the car, and there was a FA guy there. I'll remain anonymous at this stage, and he just said to me, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Well done. If you hadn't sent him, you'd have been suspended." And I always remember that, because I then had some choice words for him, because for me it then set a scene that in whatever I did from that day on, it had to be, you've got to inform players, you've got to inform the public, and everybody has a right to know what referees and how they're going to interpret the laws, and you should never change the interpretation of the law during the course of the season.
Now, you were a top referee, you'd refereed the FA Cup final, you were a FIFA international referee, and yet now you're defined by this one incident. Tony's heart's bleeding about this, but you're defined by that one incident, aren't you? West Ham supporters are not slow to...
Well, I mean, in the days after, following that, I had the death threats, which were taken quite seriously. You know, the fans have a passion, and this is, you know,
Keith,
we're talking about the semi-final here.
That was only me mum.
But the reality of all this is that since that particular decision, the law itself has been, the criteria has changed. It's more defined. But let me make it quite clear, from a refereeing perspective, I still think that denial of an obvious goal scoring opportunity is a bad law. It's a bad law for the playing side, because it really has no sympathetic overview of the actions of a player. A player can make a mistake, he can make a careless challenge, and in the case of a defence inside the penalty area, you know, that denial of the goal is replaced by the penalty kick. So it's an offence that the punishment is a triple jeopardy. It's a dismissal, it's a penalty, and it's a suspension. And that can't be right.
Are we going to get that handshake?
Can I do it off air? Otherwise the West Ham fans won't.
I'll tell you what we'll give you the pleasure of. Are you Hackett in disguise?
Are you Hackett in disguise?
That's me.
And he is. And he is. But, I mean, it was a sad, sad day, unfortunately. But I'll tell you what, the West Ham fans came out of it with so much, not for the things that were said about Keith, but with so much credit, because they sang for the remainder of that game. And they were a credit to West Ham and to me, and I'd just like to thank them on film because they made it such a good. I'll shake
Thank
through you.
I can feel the electricity. It's not, look at the distance. Come on. Thank you both.
It's been great to get an explanation of it from the other side as well.
Okay, Tony, thanks ever so much, and Keith. And we'll be back with another ref show next week. It won't be as good as this one, I can promise you that.